Have you ever wondered? Yes, you! Have you ever wondered what every single part of the battle theme from the first Golden Sun soundtrack sounds like individually? Chances are, you have not. But, Hires to the rescue! I'm gonna show you anyways, because I want to, and I think it's interesting, so follow me. So hello again, and welcome to this first installment of another new series I'm gonna call Secret Scriptures. This is gonna be a deep dive into a piece of music from a video game, and I'm gonna talk about what I love about it, and then go into the nitty-gritty details. So the piece I'm gonna talk about today is called Isaac's Battle Theme from the first Golden Sun game. It was released in 2001 and is the first installment of a three-part series. The second one is a direct sequel to the first one, and the third one plays a bit later, and there's probably never gonna be a fourth part. The cliffhanger! Anyway. The theme itself plays whenever there is a random monster encounter, so I'm pretty sure if you played the game, you've heard that a few times. The soundtrack was composed by none other than Motoi Sakuraba, who is such a versatile composer. He composed for games like Golden Sun, the Tales series, Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, and Dark Souls. Yep, talk about different vibes. He also composed some progressive rock albums, which makes sense considering if you listen to his especially boss battle themes, you can clearly hear his prog rock influence in them. Some of them go really crazy, and his prog rock albums basically sound like a concept version of a Sakuraba soundtrack, which makes sense. So if you take a look at the soundtrack of the Golden Sun series and the Tales series, I think it's a bit easier to hear the similarities. I mean, just take a look at the visuals, even the visuals kind of match up, so the soundtrack also is a bit easier to match. And then there is Dark Souls. I mean, just take a look at the pictures. A different mood between this and this. That's quite a shift of drama. It's kind of similar with the soundtrack. But if you listen really closely, especially on the boss battle themes again, you can hear Sakuraba's style pretty clearly in there actually. The way he uses the creepy kind of strings, the way he uses the choir, you can see the similarities between Golden Sun, for example, and some boss battle theme from Dark Souls series. Another thing he likes to do is using the harp in a certain way, and usually there's also some driving bass fours or drums, mostly in the Golden Sun and Tales series. Let me know down in the comments below if there is any other Sakuraba soundtrack you might want me to cover in a video like this. Alright, so on to the main course now! So, welcome to my Q&A session of my cover for the Isaac Battle theme. For now, I've muted all the things that I did additionally, so all my guitar tracks, all the additional drums and everything is muted, and we are left just with the MIDI that was in the original composition. A friend of mine, Rapheal, and me, mostly him actually, transcribed the thing by ear, and this is what we came up with. So these are our transcriptions, so if there's mistakes in there, we're sorry, it's hard to hear. Anyway. It's only the MIDI tracks as I said, and I've used a program called Sforzando, I don't know, that thing. And this is a really cool plugin, because first, it's free. You can just download it and use it. There's a few sounds in there already, and now the really cool thing about this, you can load in certain files from old games and get the sounds from them. So you just have to look for, I think it's SF2 files of certain games. And here you can see I have a few of them. And then you can basically just use the sounds from the game. This is just amazing and for free. And it sounds, 90% of it sounds really, really good. Some of them just sound buggy. I don't know if that's the nature of the original sound or what they did with it. But I've loaded in the Golden Sun ones. You can see there's a few here. Different ones from like the Celesta, music box, choirs, strings, timpani, as well as something like ho! Don't know what exactly that is, and Asian beat and stuff, so certain loops as well that I've used in the game, and you can just use them for your own good, and that's really cool. So that's what I did here. Downloaded Golden Sun ones and imported them here, and you can hear they sound like this. Which, in my opinion, sounds really close to the original. It's not 100% accurate, it's not perfect, but in my opinion, this is really cool. So yeah, so much for Sforzando. Alright, so I'm not gonna cover music theory for two reasons in this video. First one being, frankly, I still suck at it. So I'm probably just gonna say everything wrong and it's gonna take me like a month to figure out one chord. It's not that bad, but kind of. And the second reason being, I want this series to be something that anybody can watch. You don't have to know anything about music to hopefully enjoy what I'm gonna tell you, because I just want to show off the parts that I think are really cool and everything that's in there, and especially show the parts that I really like about this, which I'll dive into right now. I want to start with the pad sounds, because these are just sounds meant to be in the background. There's not too much to say about them, so I'll just wrap them up real quickly. But first, let's talk about this view right there. This is called the piano roll in a DAW, in a recording software, audio software, whatever. And what you can see here is these lines here are notes. The longer the line, the longer the note. And here on that side, you can see a piano. And this represents which note is being played. So if you see this note, for example, I can click it so hear it. This is this note on the piano right there. And here, if you click this one, we are at an E. These are the notes that are shown here. And as I said, the longer the line, the longer the note itself. The higher up the line, the higher the note, the lower down, the lower the note. So it's a pretty simple depiction of what MIDI actually is, because MIDI is just basically a language that is saying, do something with this note. Play this note at this length, at this tempo for this time, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna stick with this view because I think it's pretty easy to see what's going on. So the pad sound, the string sound there is just there to give some background information of what the chords are and to have like a foundation of sound in the background basically. And there's not too much to say about this. There's always two notes played that kind of try to invoke a chord. And first there's just basic two note chords like this. With just a bit of faster changes right there. Let me solo that real quick. So nothing too much happening right there. Bit of a faster change right there to the next one. And it's getting a bit more interesting a bit later. More longer notes. And here, a few faster changes. You'll hear them reflected later in the melody and the bass as well. And this part is a bit more interesting because you can hear that this note here, the E, is going to be in most of the chords. So if you can see there, this note is going to stay the same, while the higher notes are going to change. So this serves kind of as an anchor point for the whole thing. And now it repeats again. So much basically for the pad. Let's move on to the next element, which is the drums. So drums on their own sound like this. I actually really like that sound. It's a bit weird, a bit of thumpy, like chesty kinda, kick drum, but it's fun. It's not too much to say. A little snare fill. And that's basically most of the song. You can hear this little intro part in the beginning where the drums do a tom fill to kind of match the intro part that is played by bass and strings mostly. Which is kind of fun with the left and right kind of thing, which kind of throws you off, but I like that. And yeah, that's basically all there is to the drums. We have basically just kick and snare the whole way through, and some tom fills. Together with the snare fill, kind of. And it was pretty hard to hear if there's actually hi-hats in there. Because there's just... I think there's around 4 hits where it was like, this is probably a hi-hat, and not just some random guess of where a hi-hat might be. Alright, so not too much to say about the drums here. For my cover, we changed quite a lot, courtesy of the mighty creativity force that is Mike Schopp, the drummer, who's my drummer for basically anything I do. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm gonna talk about that in the next video more closely, what we did with the drums and basically everything else. Alright, let's move on to the next part, which is going to be the main lead synthesizer, which starts off like this. So yeah, if you've played the game, this probably stuck with you throughout the whole game and your whole life respectively. Whole thing starts off with this frantic, dissonant sounding intro arpeggio, which is harmonized, meaning there's always 2 notes playing. If we zoom in, you can actually see it as well. Yep, like this. So we have always is the first line, and the second one that plays does. And together. Play it together? No? Okay. Okay, doesn't want to do that. Together it sounds like this. Now off to the main melody, which is always harmonized as one, so there's always 2 notes going at the same time. And yeah, this is the part that's probably stuck with you for the whole game, because this is the main thing that you probably hear in your head when you hear this song. So this obviously marks the main motif basically, and at this point it shifts over to the pan flute, which I'm gonna cover a bit later. And then we have another part, which is just a single line melody this time. Pretty simple one. And this is the part that goes, basically, this is the part before the bass break, you could say. So it's after the pan flute pan flute part. Turn it up real quick. So that part, which then moves into the bass break. And here we don't have a lead going, but then it's back to this part, and we have a bending sound there, which basically is either, for example, if you're playing guitar, it's when you bend the string up, that's this kind of sound, or on a synthesizer there is a pitch wheel with which you can just lower or make the pitch higher. Or in a musical software like this, you can just draw in a pitch bend like this. So if we zoom in closer, you can see this thing here, which just represents a bend from down going up into this note at this place. So that's basically it for this part. Alright, so as the next element, I want to cover one of my favorite things about this piece, and probably about Sakuraba's composing style in general, the bass guitar, which is this. On its own, it sounds like this. Starts off with the intro arpeggio as well. So the first thing I noticed when I transcribed this was the sheer amount of variability in there. So it's really rare that the bass line stays the same in this thing. It might seem like it's pretty similar for some parts, but there's always some little thing that changes. I'm going to go into detail about this soon. So, starting up with the intro, we have this weird, kind of dissonant, not really dissonant, but kind of weird bass line that follows the synth line in the intro. Together with the synth, it sounds like this. Let me turn that up real quick a bit, because we're talking about bass now. So just some low-end information underneath the intro riff as well. So basically, this part starts introducing the first rhythm with wherever these high notes sit. So this is usually, these two are the same notes, but the one played higher and the other one played lower. And it's the same with these two. And this kind of establishes the first rhythm and then throws it off again immediately. So you kind of get used to one kind of rhythm, but then already there's a change in there. So it starts off with. So just these first two bars here. And then you expect to be similar, which it is, but you have one change in there that is this low note instead of a high note. So the first little throw off an expectation right there already. So this part starts off with introducing another rhythm that it changes afterwards immediately. So it starts off with a long note and then a short one with a little walk up. Then it starts with two low notes, followed by a high note, a longer one low note, another high note, and then with a little walk up into the next chord, which has another walk up back into the next chord change, which is different again. So just listen to this first part now. This part, different rhythm again. Starts off with more like a bassy kind of riff style in lower register, with another walk down to the next changes. So even here it doesn't repeat it. Every single one of them is a bit different. So this first is so even there, slight changes everywhere, which just throws off the expectation you might have for the next part to come. Just slightly, but this is what makes a really cool bass line, because it's always a bit different. You start expecting something, but then something else comes up, which always keeps like the interest level of the whole fighting scene up, because you never know what to expect next. Then the whole thing loops right here on the 13th bar. Goes back to the beginning riff. And now just listen. Notice something? Another thing that was different again, because the second repeat was cut short. In the first half, we had this part in there. But then in the second half, we don't have this part anymore. Going to the next part, which is the first one that is pretty basic and pretty similar the whole way through, because the attention is somewhere else. Then here we have another one that kind of stays the same for a bit, and here it changes again, and again. And now the walk up to the next part which is now kind of like the bass solo, which is kind of funny to me, because at the part where the bass is actually kind of in front, it keeps playing the same thing over and over again. So this is usually the part where people start talking. But there is one thing that makes it a bit more interesting, because there's a second bass part coming in right there, which plays in kind of a different rhythm right there. So listen to the first one again, which does this all the time. And the second one comes in playing this. And then in the end goes to this part of repeat. So together they sound like this. So first we have this part with a bit of chaos, going back to a longer line where it doesn't do anything. And now both over each other, which make like an interesting polyrhythmic kind of thing there to throw in a bit of chaos into the whole thing. So I really like what he did there, because the bass line itself is pretty simple, but then comes in this other bass part that makes it a bit more interesting. So you can really hear like his kind of prog rock influences in there, I think, because polyrhythms usually are just used in prog rock. And obviously jazz and that kind of thing. But since this is Sakuraba, probably more the prog rock kind of thing. Alright, so I think these bass lines really show one of the strongest skills of Sakuraba. Because creating such an interesting bass line that always changes all the time, that messes with your expectations. That's just something that not a lot of composers would do, I'd say. Because he could have just used a similar rhythm for one part, then a slightly different rhythm for another part, and just keep that going. Maybe with a fill or two in there somewhere, but he actually went the whole way and changed the part all the time just slightly to make it a bit more interesting the whole way through. Which I think is really, really cool. And I think this is something that you don't really consciously notice. This is just something that changes in the background. Something that makes you maybe a bit, that's a bit unsettling or something. But you don't really notice consciously. But it's still there and keeps the whole vibe of the fight going. And when I realized, when I transcribed this, how much effort he put into this, how many times the bass line just changes slightly, I put such a big smile on my face. And as you can see, it still kind of does. So I really dig that. Oh yeah, and because I didn't really explain it before, the thing with the polyrhythm there, which basically just means there's two rhythms played at the same time. So we have this one, and the other one. And this is basically a polyrhythm, just two rhythms that are playing at the same time to just throw you off a little more. Alright, and now on to the other part that I really enjoy about this. I mean, I enjoy the whole thing, but the other part that really stands out to me, and actually stands out in the whole Golden Sun soundtrack to me, that pan flute. Or I think it might have been called bottle blow, I'm not so sure. Sometimes it's been called bottle blow somewhere then. But this is basically the part where the synth drops out. So we have just first the synth lead that's leading into the next part, which is the pan flute melody now. Back to the synth. And there's also this arpeggio played in the background. So an arpeggio is basically just a chord broken up into single notes, which sounds like this. This is just there basically to give some more broader chord information that the strings themselves don't really give. So together with the strings that do the chords, it sounds like this. So this just reinforces the chord changes and gives the chords a bit of a more interesting flavor. Together with the melody, it sounds like this. And this sound basically just screams Golden Sun to me. This is the thing that I just remembered from playing Golden Sun back when I was a child. This is the thing that stuck in my mind. Just this beautiful, beautiful pan flute sound, because it shows up over and over in the soundtrack. And it was always just one of the things that stood out to me. I really like that sound. It's just such a mystical kind of thing, and also sounds pretty lovely. The cool thing about this sound in particular is the kind of attacky sound it has. So basically what I mean by attacky is like how hard it is blown in the beginning. Basically which gives the whole thing a bit of aggression vibe, I'd say. Although it's such a lovely song, and it also just starts the whole phrase off a bit different. And just listen how beautiful it sounds. This just calms me down for some not apparent reason. I really like that sound, as you probably can tell by now. Once again, this part is handed down from the lead synthesizer back to the pan flute for a completely different vibe, which I really think was a great idea, because this tones down the whole thing with the frantic arpeggio in the back still, and then going back to the synthesizer. Alright! This basically concludes this part of the video. I'm going to go into depth with my arrangement of the cover in the next video, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. Alright, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this new series, please let me know down in the comments below, and also give me suggestions of what you want me to cover next. Another one by Sakurama maybe, or something completely different, just go and tell me. And as always, like and subscribe, all the things that make YouTube think I'm interesting, so people can see me on the recommended, and that's gonna help the channel a lot, so that'll be much appreciated. Also check the description for everything else, as well as I did a metal cover also in the description, so check that out if you're interested. And as always, thanks again for watching, and see you next time. See you later.